Hey, fourth grade, it's Mrs. Heropolis with Excalibur. Haha. We're going to read the last couple of chapters of King Arthur, I hope. What'd you guys do for exercise today? You know what I did? I vacuumed my bedroom. Woo woo! Okay, here we go. I just spilled my water on myself. Okay, I got you propped up a little higher. Hopefully it'll work, right? You'd think by now I'd have this down, wouldn't you? Okay. Come on. See, my stand won't stay still. Oh, I gotta put Excalibur down. Wait a minute. Oh my gosh. Sorry, that's my finger. There we go. Excalibur does the job. See the hilt? Pretty neat, huh? Pretty cool. That's my son's sword. That is not my sword. Although I'm cool enough to have a sword. Okay, chapter 19 of King Arthur is Civil War. In spite of the great deeds by Sir Lancelot and others, the Round Table was breaking down. The ideal of brotherhood and justice formed by King Arthur had been maintained for more than 30 years. The glory of the Round Table was such that in every generation, whenever men are moved by acts of love, brotherhood, and self-sacrifice, the life of King Arthur and the Round Table springs up again in their minds. The final breakdown was caused by war between the king and Sir Lancelot. This tragedy was brought about by the Orkney clan, who fed their great anger until the greatest knights in Britain were all slain. The Orkney men were the sons of King Arthur's sister, Morgause, Queen of Orkney, married to King Lot, who had been killed in war. The head of it was Gawain, and under him were his brothers Gaheris, Agravain, and Gareth, and Mordred, his half-brother, and all of their relations. They were ambitious men who wanted power rather than justice. They were jealous of any man greater than themselves, and especially the king's right-hand man, Sir Lancelot. To them he was a Frenchman who, by hold on the queen, had wormed his way into power and position that should have been theirs. They were determined to bring down Sir Lancelot and the queen at any cost, by lies and hate if a true opportunity did not arise. Only Gawain and Gareth were the exceptions. But the rest of the clan were full of hate. Their leaders were Agravain and Mordred. Now Sir Agravain called a family council. He began by saying that Sir Lancelot was plotting to make himself king with the queen's help, and that it was the clan's duty as relatives of the king to defend him. The result was that Sir Mordred, Sir Agravain, and 1,200 knights of the Round Table, 12 kindred knights of the Round Table, caught Sir Lancelot unarmed in an ambush in the palace. He was alone with the queen, and had no armor on, and with only his sword. The door was locked, and the 14 stood in the passage outside. They called on him to come, out as a traitor and be taken. Both Sir Lancelot and the queen knew that if the Orkney knights dared do this in the palace itself, it was open declaration of war. Sir Lancelot was desperately afraid for the queen. If he was killed, the traitor could burn her alive. And there's the queen standing behind the door by Sir Lancelot. Now I would sooner have my armor on or me than be lord of all Christendom. Oh, sorry. Now I would sooner have my armor on me than be lord of all Christendom, he said. The enemy knights were preparing to break in. Lancelot called to them and said he was going to open. The queen stood behind the door, and Lancelot opened it a little. Sir Colgrevance rushed in, and the queen slammed the door and bolted it. Lancelot sprang on Sir Colgrevance, and with one blow of his bare fist broke his neck. He and the queen got the armor off the dead man and laced it on Sir Lancelot. Then the queen hid, and Sir Lancelot threw open the door. At first stroke he killed Sir Agravain, and one after another all the rest. But unfortunately, when Sir Agravain fell, Sir Mordred fled, sure now of being the sole leader of the clan. Now he has the ill fame of bringing about the ruin of all kingdoms. Sir Launcelot stood breathing hard among the slain. 13 knights of the King's Round Table were killed in his own palace. However, true friend he was, the king would have to punish Sir Launcelot for this. He left the queen, who fully understood the seriousness of the situation, promising her his support in all dangers that might be coming, and he went back to his own apartments. There he called an urgent council of his own Benwick clan. Ector, Bors, Lionel, and many others, including Lavaine of Astolat, were all attended the meeting. When they had heard the story, Sir Bors said, "We have received much good with you and much honor. We will take the ill with you as we have taken the good." They all agreed, too, that he must stand by the queen. Mischief was afoot, and they knew it would be the first strike at her. "So, my fair lords, my kin, and my friends," said Sir Launcelot, knowing that it was possible that civil war might break out, "what will you do?" "We will do as you do," replied Sir Bors. So Sir Launcelot outlined his plan, and they filled in the details. Meanwhile, Sir Mordred and Sir Gawain led their clan to demand an audience of the king. They told him that Sir Agravain and 12 members of their family had caught Sir Launcelot plotting with the queen and had been killed for their pains. They demanded that the queen should be burned and Sir Launcelot outlawed. The king heard them out, with his heart breaking. The Orkney men had beaten him at last. For years they had been gnawing at the foundations of order, justice, and love by indifference, violent angers, and lies. Now they had succeeded and had brought down the king's work. The king knew that the Orkneys were too powerful to be ignored. 13 Round Table knights of their clan killed by Sir Launcelot had to be avenged. But the king was certain that Mordred had worked some trick. The triumph showing on his pale face convinced the king of it. "Make ready," the king said in a voice they had never heard, and he gave orders to arrest the queen. The next morning, as Sir Launcelot expected, Sir Mordred carried out the first of his plans. The queen was led out to be burned. The Benwick ambush was ready, and at the signal they fell upon the procession and escort. Hardly a man escaped the fury of Sir Launcelot and his companions. His first engagement of war was to kill all the leaders of chivalry was, with the last battle, the most bitter of all. 24 knights were killed, including Sir Gaheris and Sir Gareth, who fell by Sir Launcelot's hand unknowingly in the confusion of the combat. Again Mordred escaped, for he was not among the escort. The queen stood trembling in her condemned criminal's smock, where her jailers had left her when they fled. Sir Launcelot rode up to her and pulled her up behind him, and told her to be of good cheer. The entire company rode off at top speed to Sir Launcelot's stronghold of Joyous Gard, and did not stop until they clattered into safekeeping and the portcullis clanged down behind the last man. The portcullis is that heavy metal gate that when you go to a castle they raise up and then they lower down. That's the portcullis. The country was in turmoil. The war began to take shape as men joined one side or the other. Everyone feared and hated the Orkneys, and they did no good to the king's side. Yet the king held men's vows of loyalty. The entire kingdom was split. Most of the northern lords and knights gathered at Joyous Gard to fight on Sir Launcelot's side. In the meantime, the death of Gaheris and Gareth turned Gawain's last streak of goodness into deep hate, deeper even than Sir Mordred's. The preparations for war went on fast, and before summer was over, the king's army marched on Joyous Gard. They camped around the walls of the town, inside which the mighty castle towered over the houses. Sir Launcelot was the finest soldier of his time, and he had not neglected his own stronghold. The battle was fierce, and noble knights on both sides fell. King Arthur looked for Sir Launcelot to slay him. Sir Launcelot took the king's blows, but would not strike back. So Sir Bors faced King Arthur and struck him down. Sir Bors got off his horse, drew his sword, and said to Sir Launcelot, "Sir, shall I end this war?" For he meant to slay the king. "Do not dare," said Launcelot. "Touch him no more." Then he got off his horse and raised the king and said to him, "My lord king, for the love of God, end this fighting. Remember that what I have done in many places, and how I am now rewarded with evil." The king looked on his lifelong friend, and tears broke out of his eyes. Sir Launcelot's courtesy was greater than any other man's. Then the king could no longer look on him, and rode away, saying to himself, "Alas, alas, that ever this war began." The battle went on for many days, breaking off with the fall of darkness and starting again in the morning. Sir Gawain wounded Sir Bors very badly, and was wounded himself, but no one succeeded in hurting Launcelot. The king's forces gained nothing at all. With this unsatisfactory series of battles was going on, a stern command came to the king from the Pope. The Pope is the head of the Catholic Church, in case there's somebody who might not know that. And he has been for hundreds and hundreds of years, the Pope. Not the same Pope, but the Pope. News of the civil war and the threat to Queen Guinevere had reached the Pope, who sent bishops of Rochester with a sealed letter telling the king to take his wife back again and make peace with Sir Launcelot. The king returned to Camelot to receive the Pope's messenger. He would have made peace with Sir Launcelot gladly, but Sir Gawain would not let him. The Orkneys threatened the king with civil war if the king made peace with Sir Launcelot. They agreed, however, to take back the queen. Safe conduct was granted to Sir Launcelot, and the bishop took the message to the Joyous Guard. Sir Launcelot was suspicious that it was a trap by the Orkneys to get hold of the queen, but the bishop pledged his word and showed the Pope's order, and so Sir Launcelot let her go. He took 100 knights, clothed in green velvet, their horses clothed in the same to the heels, every knight holding an olive branch. The queen had 24 ladies following her, dressed the same way. Sir Launcelot was attended by 12 young nobles on chargers, dressed in white velvet with gold bands, with precious stones gleaming in their cloaks. Their horses' trappings were of white velvet. At their head rode the queen and Sir Launcelot, both in cloth of gold. 25 years ago the young king had set his friend Sir Launcelot to bring back his bride Guinevere to Camelot, and they had come in the spring of youth and hope. Now that friend, veteran leader of the king's armies, and an outlaw in his realm, brought the queen under clouds of anger and suspicion back to a ruined court. They had all passed their youth, and now when achievement should have been growing under their feet, black loss and failure appeared. Yet as Arthur and Sir Launcelot met in each other's presence for the last time, they knew that they were stronger than these men who had beaten them by hate and trickery. Beaten them? No, they who had fought the 12 great battles that pushed out the invaders, who had seen the Holy Grail and angels, who had made Britain from end to end a land of peace and justice, could they be broken? They were forever greater than their enemies. But at this moment they could do nothing. Sir Gawain sat at the king's right hand, and the enemy filled every seat around him. Sir Launcelot alighted and gave the queen his hand. They came to the royal throne and knelt before the king. He sat silent. Sir Launcelot rose, raised the queen, and said in a voice for all to hear, "My king, by the Pope's command and yours, I have brought you back my lady the queen, as is right. If there be any knight of whatever rank except yourself who will dare to say that she is not true to you, I here myself, Sir Launcelot du Lac, will prove upon his body that she is." Sir Gawain sprang up and began wildly accusing him. He brought up the death of Gareth and Gaheris, and Sir Launcelot defended himself. Wait a minute. Sorry, gotta move a little. There we go. Sir Gawain clenched his fist and rejected all offers of peace. He declared, while the king sat silent, that Sir Launcelot was exiled, and had 15 days to leave the country, that wherever he went, Sir Gawain would follow him until one or the other was dead. What's 15 days called? Type it into the comments. Launcelot looked at the king. He sat like a stone. The queen sat motionless. Seconds passed. All three knew that the old life was broken and that the end had come. Patching up was useless. Then Sir Launcelot sighed. The tears fell on his cheeks, and he said, "Most noble Britain, whom I have loved above all over realms, here I won most of my honor, and now I must depart in this manner. I regret that I ever came here, to be thus shamefully banished, undeserved, and for no good reason. In this realm I had honor. By me and mine the Round Table won more in honor than it ever did by any one of you." He returned Sir Gawaine's challenge, and said he would answer his charge of treason wherever Sir Gawaine followed him. Then he turned to the Queen, and there was silence in the hall. "Madam, now I must leave you and this noble fellowship forever. And since it is so, I beseech you to pray for me, and I will pray for you. If any false tongues accuse you, my good lady, swiftly send me word. If any knight's hand under heaven may save you, I will save you." Slowly he kissed her, and then gave her into the king's hand. He turned, and the entire hall stood to mark his going, as many times in the past these same men had stood to cheer his victories. In silence, magnificent in cloth of gold, Sir Launcelot passed through them and out of the realm of Britain. And the king and all the court, every knight and lady, all wept as if they were out of their minds, except for Sir Gawaine. Chapter 20. The Departure of Launcelot. Sir Launcelot called all his kin and friends together of the Joyous Garde. He renamed the castle Dolorous Garde, and told them that he was exiled and was going back to his lands in France. Dolorous means very sad, to be very sad. What would they do? They all decided to go with him, for they all knew that in Britain there would be no peace, but always quarrels and war, now that the fellowship of the Round Table had been broken. He offered each of them lands, for he was lord of great provinces in western and southern France. So they took a ship at Cardiff and sailed to Benwick, which is now called Bayonne. There Sir Launcelot gave every man the lands he promised. Then he set out through all his territories to see the preparations for war. He knew that Sir Gawaine would come, and meant to be ready for him. Sure enough, in a few months Sir Gawaine and King Arthur sailed from Cardiff with an army. Sir Mordred was left as governor of the kingdom and protector of the Queen. In a few weeks the British force was ravaging Sir Launcelot's lands. In Benwick Sir Launcelot held a council of war. Sir Bors urged open combat. Sir Lionel urged waiting until the enemy had run out of food and then to attack them. They all insisted there was to be no more sparing of the king and showing courtesy, as Launcelot had done in Britain. Here they were on their ground. King Arthur had invaded them, and they wanted to be free to treat him as an enemy. The result of the council was that an offer of peace was sent by the hand of a damsel and a dwarf to the king's camp. But when she had delivered her message, the king gave Sir Gawaine permission to answer her, and the peace offer was rejected. The next morning Benwick was besieged. For 6 months the siege went on. Every day Sir Gawaine rode in front of the main gates and took on a knight in a single combat, and he always won. There were skirmishes and jousts, but no serious fighting, and the months dragged by. Then Sir Launcelot agreed to joust with Sir Gawaine, and who was defeated and wounded by so many of his knights. And here's Sir Gawaine challenging. They met at last, and the battle was long and hard. For 3 hours they fought, but in the end Sir Launcelot laid Sir Gawaine helpless on the ground. He drew back and left him alone. Sir Gawaine ground his teeth and shouted for him to finish him off, swearing that as soon as he was healed he would seek him out again. Sir Launcelot answered that he would be ready for him, but that he would not kill a helpless man. Sir Gawaine was carried to his tent and lay there for 3 weeks while his wound healed. When he was well, he came out and challenged Sir Launcelot again. They fought again, and the result was the same. As Gawaine lay on the field, frantic with defeat and helplessness, he brandished his sword and tried to stab Sir Launcelot, shouting defiance at him. Sir Launcelot turned away, saying, "Whenever you can stand on your feet, I will fight you, but I will not strike a wounded man who cannot stand." He went back into the city gates. In his madness, Sir Gawain refused to listen to any sense or persuasions from the king or his friends. He did not care if the entire army perished cold and hungry, so long as his thirst for revenge was satisfied. His only plan was to wait until his wound was healed, and then fight Sir Launcelot again. But meanwhile news came from Britain to King Arthur that brought the entire camp to his senses. Mordred had announced to the people of Britain that he had received news that the king and Sir Launcelot were dead, and therefore he declared himself king, had been crowned, and was about to force the queen to marry him. She had shut herself up in the Tower of London, and Mordred had surrounded it. Gawain and his grievances were forgotten. The siege was over. The king ordered his army to pack and make all speed for Britain. And here's a small picture of the fortress of London, which is still there. Can you see it? It's still there today. If you type into Google the Tower of London, you'll see a recent picture of it. And this is, let's see, is this the last chapter? This is the last chapter. The battle. Oh, no, it's not. There's two more, sorry. The last battle and death of Arthur, chapter 21. Sir Mordred was ready for the king's return. The moment he had planned so long had come. It was he of whom Merlin had said on the day when Arthur won his sword Excalibur that a son of King Arthur's sister would be destruction of his kingdom. The prophecy was soon to come true. News of the king's approach reached Mordred, and he prepared to resist him with a large force drawn up on the Dover beach. But King Arthur was courageous, so courageous that no one could stop him from landing, and his knights followed him fiercely. But in the landing Sir Gawain was mortally wounded. Sir Launcelot was in France, but before Sir Gawain died, he made his peace with Sir Launcelot, saying aloud to the king and all the knights gathered around, "Through me and my pride you have all this shame and trouble. If that noble knight Sir Launcelot were here with you, this unhappy war would never have begun, for he, through his nobility, held all your enemies in subjection." All right, here's a picture of Mordred. He asked for paper and wrote to Sir Launcelot, asking him to return to England to help the king and to see his tomb. At noon he died, and the knights buried him in a chapel in the Dover castle. Now only Mordred was left of the Orkney clan, King Arthur's own blood, who had destroyed his kingdom. At noon the next day there was another skirmish between the king's forces and Sir Mordred's that ended in the rebels retreating. Then both sides collected their forces for a decisive battle. Mordred's stronghold was Canterbury. The king's strength lay in the west, so he set out to march in that direction, gathering forces as he went. Where the last battle was fought we do not know. We only know that it was somewhere on a far west seacoast and on a misty day. On the night before the battle, King Arthur dreamed that Sir Gawain came to him and warned him that if he fought Sir Mordred on the next day, he would be killed as well as the enemy. He must make a treaty, postponing the battle for a month, and offer Mordred whatever terms would make him agree. In a month Sir Launcelot would arrive, and joining the king they would defeat the rebels. There's Sir Gawain on his deathbed. The king awoke and sent for his leaders and told them his dream. They all agreed to obey it. Sir Lucan and Sir Bedivere and 2 bishops were sent to Mordred's camp to offer terms. Finally, Mordred agreed to make peace at the price of getting Cornwall and Kent immediately, and being made King Arthur's heir to all of Britain. A meeting was arranged to sign the treaty between King Arthur and Mordred, with 14 attendants each on the plains between their 2 armies. Neither side trusted the other. Each side was instructed by its leader to be fully armed, and if a single sword were drawn on the enemy's side, they were to rush into battle. The king and Sir Mordred met. The treaty was signed, and wine was fetched to mark its signing. As they waited, a snake came out of a bush and stung a knight in the foot. He seized his sword to kill the snake, and instantly both suspicious armies blew their trumpets, drew swords, and rushed upon each other. Back and forth surged the armies. The rebels were driven back, but fought every step, for they knew there would be no mercy for them. At last they found themselves trapped against the beach. The cliffs rang with the slaughter, trumpets of battle, the clash of the battle axe, spear, and sword, the screams of horses, and the shouts of men. Thus they fought all the long day, and never stopped until 100,000 noble knights lay dead upon the cold earth. All that mighty host, only 2 remained alive to stand beside the king, Sir Lucan and Sir Bedivere, and they were both wounded. "Where is that traitor Sir Mordred who has caused all this evil?" said the king, glaring around on the dead and gripping his sword Excalibur. Then he saw Sir Mordred leaning on his sword among a great heap of dead men. Sir Lucan tried to stop the king, reminding him of his dream and how his life had been spared so far, and that the day was his, since there were 3 of them left, and of the enemy only Sir Mordred lived. But the king, with all of his knights dead about his feet, would not now flinch. Sorry. "Come death, come life," he cried. "I see him yonder alone. He shall never escape my hand." They ran at each other. The king's sword thrust right through Sir Mordred, who in his death agony hurled himself forward right against the hilt to strike the king on the helmet and pierce it through his head. They both fell. Mordred was dead, and the king was desperately wounded. His wound was deep. Sir Bedivere lifted him up and carried him to a chapel near the battlefield. As they carried the king on the short journey, Sir Lucan died, and Sir Bedivere was left alone with the king. King Arthur felt his end was drawing near, and he remembered Excalibur, his sword. On one side of the blade was carved, "Take me," and on the other, "Cast me away." With that sword he had won and held the kingdom, and now the end was near. He said to Sir Bedivere, "Take my good sword Excalibur, go with it to the water's edge, and throw the sword into the water. Then come back and tell me what you saw." Sir Bedivere took Excalibur and climbed down the shore. All the way down, the magic and the worth of Excalibur worked in his mind until he desired to possess it for his own. He half desired for its value and beauty in precious stones, and half as a relic of the king. On the seashore he held the long blade in his hand, and the moonlight turned to the bloodstains black and ran like sparks around his hand. He did not throw it. He hid Excalibur under a stunted tree and went back to the king and told them he had done as he was told. Eagerly the king raised himself in his weakness. "What did you see?" "I saw nothing but dark waves." The king stared at him and realized the truth. "You have lied to me," he said. "Now go quickly and do as I have told you. Spare not, but throw it in." Sir Bedivere went again, but all the way he thought that the king was weak and dying and did not know what he was saying, and that it would be good for the future if the sword was saved. All the king's knights were killed. The king was dying. There would not be one trace or proof left of their greatness. The sword must be saved. He hid Excalibur again, and went a second time to the king in the ruined chapel. "What did you see?" asked King Arthur. "I saw the water lapping on the rocks and rippling in the weeds," answered Sir Bedivere. Then the king raised up in majesty, and wrath flashed in his eyes. "Ah, traitor and untrue, you have betrayed me twice!" Sir Bedivere shrank back. "Who would have thought that you would have been so dear and precious to me, and called a noble knight, that you would betray me for the riches of this sword? Now go again quickly, for your long delay has put me in danger of my life, for I have taken cold. Unless you do as I tell you now, if I ever see you again, I shall kill you with my own hand, for you would let me die for the sake of my rich sword." Sir Bedivere turned and fled. He ran down the rocky path and stumbled to the stones near the tree, seized Excalibur and hurled it far out over the water. But before Excalibur dipped in the surface, up rose an arm clothed in white silk, caught it by the hilt, brandished it 3 times, and drew it under the sea. The knight's hair rose upon his head. King Arthur heard his steps running and slipping on the path, and knew before he spoke that he had been faithful the third time. "Alas, help me get away," said the king, "for I am afraid I have stayed too long." Sir Bedivere lifted the king on his shoulders and carried him down to the water. There they found a barge hung with black from bow to stern, crowded with figures draped and veiled in black, and among them a crowned queen with 2 other queens, all 3 veiled in black. From the barge rose a cry of grief as they approached. "Now put me in the barge," said the king. Sir Bedivere did so, and the sorrowful figures laid him down with his head in the queen's lap. There you are. As she took him, she said, "Ah, my dear brother, why have you stayed so long from me?" The barge began to draw away from the shore, and Sir Bedivere realized that he was left alone, and behind him lay 100,000 dead. "My Lord Arthur," he cried, "what will become of me now that you are going and leaving me here alone?" "Comfort yourself," answered the king from the barge, "and do as well as you can, for I can do no more good for you. I must go to Avalon and heal my grievous wound." The barge was moving away, and his voice came faintly on the night air. "If you never hear of me again, pray for my soul." Sir Bedivere stood still a long time, recalling many memories, until the barge became a black dot against the horizon that was rosy with dawn, and the sounds of wailing from across the sea finally died away. Then he left the shore, climbed back onto the cliffs, and turning away from the battleground, walked all night through the woods. In the early light he came to a chapel, and there he saw a hermit lying on the ground in prayer beside a new grave. "Sir," said Sir Bedivere, "what man is buried here that you pray for so intently?" "Fair son," answered the hermit, "I only know by guessing. This very night at midnight came a number of ladies who brought a dead man and prayed me to bury him." "Alas," said Sir Bedivere, "that was my lord King Arthur, who lies buried in this chapel." He fainted as he spoke. When he recovered, he asked the hermit if he might stay there always and serve him and pray for the soul of the king. However, neither of them knew for certain what man lay buried there, nor where the barge had gone with the 3 queens. No man had known the secret of Sir Arthur's birth, King Arthur's birth, and no man knew the secret of his end. The king said he was going to Avalon to be healed of his wound, and after he was healed, in the dark days of war and murder, robbery and burning that came upon the land when Arthur's rule was gone, it was whispered that the king was not dead, that he had only gone to another place, and that he would come again and set up in the rule of justice and right. Men said that in an unknown tomb in a chapel in the forests near Glastonbury there was a prophecy carved in crude letters scarcely readable. Hic jacet Arthurus rex quondam rexque futurus, which means, "Here lies King Arthur, king that was and king that shall be." Okay, the final chapter, which isn't very long. Bear with me, I know I'm over my half an hour. The death of the death of Guinevere and Sir Lancelot. I almost said Sir Guinevere. I'm so silly. The battle had been fought, and all the ruling knights and lords of Britain had been killed. The king had vanished on his unknown destiny, and Britain had no ruler, no court, and no government. What of the queen? She stayed in the Tower of London until news came of the last battle. Then she put off her royal clothes, dressed in black, and with 5 ladies took their horses early one morning and slipped out of London the moment the gates were opened. Disguised as nuns, they fled across Britain to the west, to Amesbury in Wiltshire, where there was an abbey. The queen had become a nun, put on the black and white habit, and led the strictest life in the convent. A habit is the uniform, I guess, that the nuns wear. Some still wear to this day. It's usually black with a white around their face and their neck. They showed such constancy and goodness, combined with the strength of her character and knowledge of how to rule, that in time she was made head of the convent. She stayed there until the end of her life, But there was one more incident awaiting her from the stormy world outside. Sir Launcelot received the letter written by Sir Gawain on his deathbed, telling him of Mordred's treachery and asking him to come at once to help the king and rescue the queen. He did not know about the last battle. He and Sir Bors at once gathered the fighting force of the family from all over France and came with speed to Britain. They landed at Dover, where they were told the news of the last battle and the collapse of the kingdom. Sir Launcelot made his peace with the dead Gawain and knelt for long hours by his tomb. With that feud healed, and Sir Launcelot turned to his next duty, he summoned all his followers and told them that he was going back to look for the queen. If he did not return in 15 days, they were to go home. He thanked them for their support. Sir Bors came to him after the council and urged him to take a few friends with him, as Britain was fast becoming a dangerous country again with bandits on the road. But Sir Launcelot was thinking of other things and answered, "Stay here, for I shall go alone on my journey." He knew where the queen would have hidden, and he rode straight there. He knocked at the gate, and though no man was allowed inside the nunnery, when the nuns at the gate saw Sir Launcelot, they backed away from the gate and left it open. In he walked and passed unchallenged through the courtyard after courtyard, the nuns gasping at the sight of him and silently gliding away. He asked one where to find the queen, and she pointed without speaking. He came around a corner and saw her and stood still. When Queen Guinevere saw him there, she fainted 3 times. Her nuns brought a seat, and Sir Launcelot stood still, waiting. When the queen could speak, the nuns brought her to him. There she said to them all, and to him, "Through this man and me has all this war happened, and the deaths of the noblest knights of the world, and through us is my most noble lord slain. Therefore, Sir Launcelot, I demand and beg of you, for the sake of all the love that was between us, that you never see me face to face again. For God's sake, never come near me again. Go back to your kingdom and keep it well from war and harm, for well I have loved you in the past, my heart can no longer bear the strain of seeing you." "Now, my beloved," said Sir Launcelot, "do you want me to go away to my country? That I will never do, for I shall never betray all the promises I have made to you. But the same life you have taken to, I will take too, and I will pray especially for you." "Ah, Sir Launcelot, if you would do it and keep it," said the queen. They talk very I can't think of the word. I'll think of it. Very formal. They talk very formally to each other, don't they? "Madam, never yet did you know me to break my promise. In you I have had my earthly joy, and if I had found you so disposed, I had thought of taking you back to my own kingdom. But since I find you have chosen this life, I choose it too. So, madam, I pray you, kiss me once and never more." "No, I will never do that," said the queen, and so they parted. Sir Launcelot rode all day and all night until he heard a bell ringing in the forest. He followed it and found the chapel where Sir Bedivere lived with the hermit, and there he stayed and became a hermit with them. Meantime at Dover his friends were growing anxious. Sir Lionel rode to London to look for him and was killed by bandits on the road. Sir Bors decided to send the army home, and then he, with Sir Launcelot's brother Sir Ector, went out in search. They were led by mysterious fate to the very hermitage that Sir Launcelot was, and there they stayed and lived a holy life with the others. 6 years passed, and one night a vision came to Sir Launcelot in the night that he should go to the queen. In the morning he got ready. He and his friends walked to Amesbury, and when they arrived at the nunnery they found that the queen had died half an hour before they came. With hundreds of torches burning around her on the bier, they escorted the queen for the last time on the journey to Glastonbury. There's Queen Guinevere. After she was laid in the earth, Sir Launcelot did not live more than 6 weeks. Neither food nor drink interested him, and although the loving Sir Bors and all his friends tended him, he faded before their eyes. He scarcely slept at all, and was generally found beside the queen's tomb, cheerful but not interested in living. Soon he was too weak to get up from bed, and he made Sir Bors promise to take him all the way north to the Joyous Gard and bury him there. One night Sir Ector awoke suddenly, and by impulse went to Sir Launcelot's cell. He found him dead, but smiling. "Ah, Launcelot," he said, "you are the head of all the knights. You are never matched. You are the most courteous knight, the truest friend, the truest lover that ever loved a woman, the kindest man that ever came among a company of knights, the gentlest man that ever ate in the hall among ladies, and the sternest knight to your enemies that ever struck with a sword." After the burial of Sir Launcelot, Sir Bedivere stayed in the hermitage for the rest of his life, but Sir Bors and Sir Ector went home to France, to their own lands. From there they went on crusades to the Holy Land, where in the end they were killed fighting against the Saracens. And that, my friends, is the end of the Tales of King Arthur. I was so happy to read this to you because even though I knew the stories and had seen movies, I never actually read it. So I was really happy to read this with you. I'm sorry I stumbled on so many names because they are kind of hard to say. And I will see you all, or at least Miss Cooper's class, I'll see you tomorrow at the awards ceremony. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I miss you guys, and I can't wait to see you again soon. Bye-bye.